Hello, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time of day it is. It's on. Okay, hello. I'm Rabbi Greg Harris, Senior Rabbi here at Bethel, and so happy that you are here for what is such an important conversation, and so glad that you guys are here again. Also, I have to brag, not just as a parent, but as a rabbi. I have lots to brag about parenthood, but so glad that Galia, a Bethel member, is soon becoming the board chair of the JCRC. And so we're the work of the JCRC is so important and so diverse. Today's conversation is just one example of that. Today, I was invited into what I consider a sacred conversation with a sixth grader. That he wanted to talk to his rabbi about why people hate Jews. And so we met for ice cream this morning or this afternoon, and his mom dropped him off and she went shopping around, and we sat together for about a half hour. In case you're wondering, coffee Oreo is the answer. But why do people hate Jews? And I told this 12-year-old, one, I don't know the answer, because people hate Jews before October 7th and before the state of Israel and for a very long time. But how we respond to that is what we can control. And it is about being proud of being Jewish, proud of who we are. And we together in conversation named two things to be proud of. One, he said, I've never met a dumb Jew, he said. And then he paused and he said, except for my parents. So I knew he truly was just 12 years old. But the other thing he said to be proud of, from a 12-year-old, which is the greatest wisdom, he said, I'm proud to be part of community. Because we are never standing alone. And so I keep thinking about that all afternoon, how we can stand together in difficult times. And I think that that is one aspect of this conversation tonight, of us standing together to lean on each other, not just as Jews leaning on Jews, but as relearning how we stand together in coalitions, re-marginalizing the hate. And so I'm very excited and appreciative of this conversation that's taking place. And of course, our wonderful representative of the Israeli embassy as well here. It's important. So again, welcome to Bethel, and thank you to the JCRC and to each of you for being here.
Okay, but you're much taller than I am. How's this? Can people hear me? Okay, good. Hate that. People in my house always put things on high shelves. Anyway, good evening. Welcome. My name is Galia Franklin-Siegel. I am the Chief Operating Officer of the Jewish Community Relations Council of Greater Washington. And I want to extend my thanks to Rabbi Harris, to everyone at Bethel for hosting us and for co-sponsoring the program tonight. I also want to thank our other co-sponsors, Jewish Social Services Agency. Rabbi Rachel Hirsch is here representing JESA, and Jewish Women International. So thank you all for making this program happen. Most importantly, I want to thank our phenomenal staff at JCRC who have worked so hard, not only on this program, but this is the second program of the day that we are doing with Dr. Miri Bar-Halpern. And I want to really recognize Adam Odessa, the director of our Israel Action Center, and Charlotte Barrios, and our intern, Emily, who have all worked very hard to make all of these programs a success. I also want to recognize Anila Ali, who is here, a wonderful, wonderful partner to the JCRC and to the Jewish community at such a difficult time. Anila is the founder and president of the American Muslim and Multi-Faith Women's Empowerment Council. I'm going to tell you what that really means. What that really means is Anila shows up and that she cares about bringing people together and caring about each other. And that, to me, in this world is the most important thing. So thank you for being here again. Tonight's discussion is not an easy one. I'm sure we can all think of 100 things we'd rather be doing on this beautiful spring Sunday evening than talking about and processing the pain and trauma involved with being Jewish at this deeply challenging moment in our people's history. The lasting impact of what was the worst slaughter of Jews since the Holocaust, Shabbat HaShchorah, or Black Shabbat of October 7th, continues to be felt on a daily basis in Israel, across the Middle East, and in the Jewish diaspora. And even today, the news from the Middle East has been difficult. On a good day, we Jews carry with us the baggage of centuries of violence, displacement, okay, better? Okay. On a good day, we Jews carry with us the baggage of centuries of violence, displacement, oppression, longing, and loss, culminating in the worst genocide in human history from which we have yet to fully recover, whether numerically, psychologically, politically, or otherwise. And the resilience, communal strength, and wisdom for which our people are rightly recognized has been sorely tested since October 7th. The shock, horror, grief, and anger of that day, and of Israel's ensuing multi-front wars, the astounding spike in anti-Semitism worldwide, and the internal divisions that consume us. They've all triggered fresh emotional, physical, and financial burdens and vulnerabilities. We see it every day at the JCRC, in the Jewish parents coming to us because their children are experiencing anti-Semitic bullying at school, the Jewish teens who are afraid to self-identify as Jews in the presence of their peers, the families who have lost relatives or who fear for their children serving in the Israel Defense Forces, the Jewish mental health professionals ostracized by colleagues because they are Zionist Jews, and so much more. It is at this pivotal moment that our people's indomitable instinct to persevere, to better understand, and to flourish has been activated and amplified. And one of the best role models for that activation is Dr. Miri Bar-Halpern, whom the JCRC is delighted to have brought to our community for 2 programs today to teach, listen, validate, and inspire. This morning, Dr. Bar-Halpern led a panel session designed specifically to empower Jewish mental health providers to confront anti-Semitism and support Jewish clients in a time of increasing communal stress and isolation. One of the themes that emerged was that trauma is not experienced only in the moment of crisis. Trauma is compounded when people's experiences are minimized, denied, or invalidated. Again, we see that every day at the JCRC. Tonight, we hope to explore that reality from multiple perspectives: personal, professional, communal, and global. Our panelists each bring unique experience, expertise, and lived experience to this conversation. Dr. Bar-Halpern is a clinical psychologist, trauma specialist, educator, and researcher whose work focuses on resilience, mental health, and the ways individuals and communities respond to adversity. She has developed global training programs and public health initiatives focused on resilience, healing, and recovery, especially in the face of extremism, identity-based violence, and chronic stress. In the years since October 7th, she has become a powerful voice in exposing and combating anti-Semitism in mental health professions and in leading our community to proactively grapple with our collective and personal pain. Meredith Jacobs is CEO of Jewish Women International and a leading advocate for women's safety, dignity, and equality. Through JWI's work at the United Nations and its I Believe Israeli Women campaign, Meredith has helped bring international attention to the experiences of Israeli women and the importance of confronting denial and misinformation surrounding sexual violence, including and especially the violence perpetrated by Hamas on October 7th and in the time after that. Joining us as well is Sassan Hassan, Minister for Public Diplomacy at the Embassy of Israel to the United States, who brings both professional and personal perspectives to this conversation. Through her work at the Israeli Embassy, Minister Hassan's experiences as a mother navigating anti-Semitism in local DC public schools, as a supervisor to one of the two people who were murdered outside the Capitol Jewish Museum, and as a Druze woman and a Druze leader. She offers important insights into how these issues affect individuals, families, and communities across the globe. Tonight's conversation will be moderated by JCRC's incoming president and Bethel member, Galia Messika Greenberg. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge that the topics that we will be discussing during this evening's program can be difficult and emotional. We're grateful to have Rabbi Hirsch here from JESA with us tonight. If at any point you need to step out, take a break, or speak with someone, please know that support is available. Just walk out of the room and Rabbi Hirsch will be there. And I'm pleased to turn the program over to Galia now.
Perfect. Thank you. Gila, all right, I'm going to bring it. Thank you. Thanks, Adam. Okay, so thank you everyone for joining us tonight. Welcome. Tonight's conversation brings together three remarkable women, as you just heard, whose work intersects at a critical moment, helping individuals and communities navigate trauma while finding pathways towards healing, resilience, advocacy, and dialogue. As an Israeli American myself, raising 3 kids in the MCPS public school system, I have seen firsthand how certain issues have moved from headlines right straight into our homes and our communities. And this conversation is especially meaningful and personal to me as well, so I'm looking forward to the discussion tonight. What is interesting about tonight's conversation is that rather than focusing on what happened to us as a community, we'll touch upon that as well, but I'm hoping that we can explore what happens next. How can we react as individuals? How can we react as a community? And how do we move forward without ignoring the pain that we've all experienced? So with that, I'd like to first turn to Miri to sort of set the stage and frame the issues that we'll be talking about and helping us understand some of the terms that we'll be using tonight, throughout the night. So Miri, much of your work since October 7th has focused on, and I'll mention these terms, communal trauma, traumatic invalidation, and post-traumatic growth. Before we explore these ideas, can you help us just understand what each of these terms means? I personally, when we were first preparing for this conversation, I was personally interested in the relationship between trauma and growth and sort of this post-traumatic growth idea. So if you can just help us understand that before we dive into the rest of the topics.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, JCRC, again. I'll try not to repeat the morning, but if you were in the morning, I'm going to try my best not to be boring. Okay, so let's start with, which one did you want to start with? Communal trauma or post-traumatic growth?
Let's start with communal trauma.
Okay. When you think about trauma, I like to think of trauma as a spectrum. You have stress. I'm feeling stressed right now. My heart is beating fast. And that's okay, right? It makes us more kind of like tunnel vision and oriented to what we're doing. Then we have traumatic stress when something happened to us, like an adverse event. Then we have post-traumatic stress, PTSD, and so on. What's been happening for many communities, and especially our communities, what we call CTS, which is continuous traumatic situation, where the event happened, it started, but it did not end. For many Israelis, they would say that when the last hostages came back, we were able to start healing. I would argue that for us outside of Israel, because of anti-Semitism, we're constantly alert. There's this hypervigilant, and because it's trauma, we feel it in our body. It's in our nervous system, and that's connected to intergenerational trauma, and I can get nerdy and talk about the brain, but that will be a different talk. But there is a reason why we're feeling what we're feeling. Now, trauma isolates. For anyone who ever experienced trauma, you usually feel alone. There is shame. There is this feeling of it just happens to me. With community trauma, we're all in it together. Sometimes we're not aware of it, but there's something that happened, especially on October 7th, that the trauma also connected many of us. And I think when we lean into that, when we're not just focusing on how trauma isolates us, it actually leads to the second part, which is post-traumatic growth. So if trauma isolates, right, then community and connection brings us together. And when you think about post-traumatic growth, well, let me go a step back. Resiliency. Most of us are resilient, right? Most of us, when something bad happened to us, we can bounce back. People call it common magic. Most people are resilient. Post-traumatic growth is different. It's not just surviving something, it's thriving from it. It's changing it. It's giving meaning to the trauma without erasing the trauma. It's being able to live with that scar that the trauma created. But when you give meaning to it, you actually become something else. You transform to something stronger. Post-traumatic growth are the hostages who came back, many of them. Not all, but many of them. When they go and they talk, you would hear some of them saying, of course I didn't want to go through what I went through, and it made me something different, and for some cases better. That will be the perfect example of post-traumatic growth. And traumatic invalidation. Okay, so traumatic invalidation is a thing about gaslighting, but from a scientific perspective. So it's when you're sharing your experience and your feelings, your thoughts, and the response from people around you is, it's not a big deal. Or what about the other side? Or it didn't really happen. So like there's denial of the trauma. Dr. Marsha Linehan and Dr. Melanie Harney, which are big names in dialectical behavioral therapy, they talk about traumatic invalidation that happens when a caregiver is denying your trauma, or with other minorities as well. And Melanie Harney actually coined 9 different criteria for traumatic invalidation. There's emotional neglect and criticizing and ignoring and denying reality and so on. And basically, when it happens from the community, what I would argue is that it creates this existential crisis. Because we need our group, right? We need people around us. And when the group is pushing us out, then we're left to feel, well, where do we belong? So in the Jewish community, the co-author of my article, Traumatic Invalidation in Jewish Community, Dr. Wolfman and I, we basically proved that the Jewish community met all 9 criteria of traumatic invalidation. I was sharing with the team before that we just concluded a new research with the Jewish Community Mental Health Initiative, and we looked at the traumatic invalidation scale that Dr. Harney coined before. And we were trying to see whether or not it actually lead to some symptoms. Because in the literature, it says that it can lead to distress symptoms and anxiety. And we proved without a doubt, we had 733 participants. And when you're experiencing traumatic invalidation, first of all, every single participant experienced traumatic invalidation in our survey. But the more you experience traumatic invalidation, the more you're going to have symptoms of depression, PTSD, and anxiety. But something else happened. I'm connected to your previous question. We also asked people about their Jewish identity and where do they feel more supported. 80% said that they feel more Jewish, and they actually lean into the community. So both things can happen at the same time. You can feel distress and trauma, and you can be resilient and thrive from it.
Thank you. And I mean, I felt that. I mean, I don't have the scientific backup, but I did feel the community certainly coming together, especially after October 7th. But just to follow up on this, so we as a community are experiencing trauma, but I guess not everyone has experienced, of course, the events in Israel. So how can we, I mean, what is sort of the science behind experiencing trauma as a community, even though individually you may have not been experiencing those type of traumatic events?
So that's where the intergenerational trauma kicks in, right? So we all have a shared history, and as a people, we share a narrative of trauma I used to have a mentor in when I was at McLean Hospital that said that trauma starts when the sperm meets the egg. Right? We don't come to this world just blank. We carry our stories, our ancestors' stories. So you can absolutely be outside of Israel, and unfortunately, because of social media and the fact that Hamas recorded everything and streamlined it, many people outside of Israel felt like they were there. They could see themselves in the victims. And I think that's based on what happened that day, but it also sits on all the previous trauma. That's a trauma network that is being activated. So when I bring it back to anti-Semitism, when the event happens today, it's not just about that event. It triggers October 7th, it triggers the Holocaust, it triggers for us Israelis the Intifada. So there's a lot that comes into that. So people might say, oh, you're overreacting. It's like, no. My whole trauma network is being activated right now. So that's why when we say we carry it in our body, we feel it in every single part of us, but there is a science behind it. When you think about, there's actually a lot of, okay, I'm going to get nerdy. There's a lot of research that was done with Holocaust survivors and second generation. And they show there is a genetic component to the transition of trauma. They show that that offsprings of survivors, when they're facing a traumatic situation, they actually show very similar symptoms to their parents. Also after 9/11, there were mothers who were pregnant during 9/11. Their kids were obviously not during 9/11, but when they were born, their cortisol levels were different. Meaning and the cortisol is the stress hormone. So there is a genetic biological component to trauma as well.
Okay. Yeah. No, thank you. One of the things you had just mentioned was traumatic invalidation and why it's so damaging to us as a community. And I know, Meredith, a lot of your work surrounds sort of the importance of sort of acknowledgement, of validation in the Jewish community. So perhaps you can tell us, the audience, from your perspective, why is your work, the recent work that you've done, is centered on validation, and why it's so important to healing?
So violence and abuse is about power and control. So when you take away someone's voice, that's further abuse. That's further dehumanizing. And it's interesting, in our, I Believe Israeli Women, I was looking at the Instagram, what my staff was putting up, and they're doing a series now chronicling different times in history when there has been sexual violence perpetrated against Jewish women. And today's was about Dina as kind of the first example. And what I hadn't thought of that my staffer put up was that we don't hear Dina's voice. You hear the story of her brothers, the community, the reaction. You don't hear Dina. And that's remarkable in the way that that dehumanizes the victim and the survivor. When you tell someone, I don't care about your story, I don't want to hear your voice, I don't want to hear your truth, that's further stopping her healing, because she doesn't feel that she deserves any kind of treatment, respect, healing. It's just further emotional trauma and abuse. And that's why this campaign, where, Miri, as you said, they posted videos showing what they did, and yet the world is saying it's a lie, or worse, you deserved it. And we did a study that I know we're going to talk about later about the ripple effects of October 7th and what specifically young Jewish women in the United States, what their experiences are, the messages of your body is not worthy of our care. You deserve this violence. And so one of the respondents of the survey wrote she no longer wears heels in Jewish events in case she needs to run. And so we just very simply posted her truth on our Instagram, and the kind of hateful messages that followed Someone else then tried to add to it and say she also doesn't wear hairspray because it's flammable. And the responses were, you should burn. And it just horrendous.
Yeah, I mean, you touch on this subject, and it sort of relates to some extent. On October 7th, a lot of the terror acts were essentially advertised on social media, were actually broadcast on social media as they were happening. And your comment now is sort of, in a way, social media comments and people are sort of responding immediately. Have you seen that as sort of just as your work has progressed, just a generational sort of difference with, new sort of the younger generation being more on social media? How does that impact?
That's why we specifically looked at young people. I'm very lucky. My friends, I'm at that age where I only surround myself with people I like and I want in my life, and whether it's in real life or on social media, I'm in this lovely bubble. And that's not what young people are experiencing anywhere. I just spent the weekend we have 12 Young Women's Impact Networks around the country. So we brought in representatives from each of the networks, and just the way I am, we had this summer, and I was like, have them come to my house, I'll cook. They were with us for Shabbat dinner all day Saturday, all day Sunday. And the young women were sharing stories about what they're experiencing. And they were saying that, they'll go to work and they have coworkers who are have Free Palestine stickers on their water bottles, or their supervisors are very, anti-Israel, and they're afraid to go ask for time off for Passover. And I'm trying to remember where I was going. I'm sorry, I'm so tired right now. But I do think they have no break. They have no break. They've lost their friends. They're experiencing online, on dating apps. There is no place where they can just breathe and set down their burdens. And I don't think that's what older generations are experiencing.
So Sasan, over to you. As Minister of Public Diplomacy, I wanted you to maybe address the report that came out recently. So the Silence No More report, which was put out by the Civil Commission on October 7th, crime by Hamas against women and children, that came out recently. And it documented, as we all know, extensive evidence of sexual violence, which was committed during October 7th and also during captivity. Now, you've been engaged in conversation, I know, about how the world, the UN, and even our local community has reacted to those events, and this ties into the issues of invalidation as well. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about what you have learned as far as sort of the world's reaction to those events, and what is the role essentially of acknowledgement, truth-telling, and recognition in helping communities heal after trauma.
Well, thank you for your question. Thinking about an answer, the only thing I have to say is that I'm afraid of what I have learned. The sexual assaults denial is a very strong narrative. And after October 7, we saw that not only denying what happened to our people, not only, as Meredith also mentioned, that we deserve it, or even saying we did it to our own people, really, like, it's just going beyond any kind of imagination of how wrong the community, the international community reacted. It was a very continuous reaction toward the Israeli status of trauma. And both in diplomacy and in international community, where there was a lot of effort from our side as an embassy to share information And this is ridiculous because no other community around the world that went through such kind of atrocities needed to bring their buried women to prove, or men, to prove the sexual assaults they went through, or any other kind of injuries. I remember Rabbi Harris mentioned the child that asked you, why do they hate Jews so much? A week into the war, my son, who was almost the same age, a little bit younger, came back home and he said, why do they hate us so much? And I was in a situation that I needed to explain to him what does it mean, anti-Semitism, into depth in a way that it's harming him as well, although he's not Jewish. So, but I want to tell you something. What I found out, maybe it's a radical saying right now, mentioning this, but October 7 happened, May 21st happened last year when we lost our Sarah and Yaron, Zichronam Livracha. 2 months later, the massacre of our women in Sweden and men. And no one cares. So as long as you are not a community that has a great PR sponsored by Qatar, supported by Iran and some other radical terrorist organizations, your voice doesn't matter. And I got furious about that. So wherever I can speak loudly and clearly against this injustice and against this bias of I don't mind as a woman, as a diplomat, as an Israeli, as a Druze, I will fight back. And this is what I'm doing every day. So the reports are very important, and the embassy has hosted several circles of discussions. In fact, it was our Sarah who led the discussions among civil society and even about different circles in administration and working with our congressional affairs. And we are continuing that because we have no other choice but keep telling the truth and sharing the information. And I want to tell you something. We're not alone. I see a lot of people these days of communities that we cultivated very good relationship with, and it's enlarged the relation of the embassy with them, asked to come and to bear witness to what happened on October 7. And they asked to see these footages, which were taken by the terrorists themselves. So when I lost hope that there is no more good, I started finding it in places I didn't expect it. And mainly, clearly, when we speak about resilience and about, reviving, it's like you have no other choice. This is your home. This is your own people, and you will fight back.
Yeah. Thank you for your work. What I found also quite astonishing is that everything was recorded, so the proof was right there. So the concept of trying to prove it when it was actually recorded is really...
It was easily claimed that we faked these videos.
Right. And then the other thing, of course, is that the atrocities were not only addressed to Jews, it was Arabs and Muslims and other Filipino, it was a lot of other communities that were involved, and yet that didn't get enough attention, it seemed.
Not only didn't get enough attention, Anila is here. Anila, do you remember the event we did at CSUN? So, we talked about community and allies, and as Gila mentioned before, there's no better one than Anila, and she's getting a lot of heat for that, especially recently. But Anila, and we did an event at CSUN in California, and it was about Believe All Women, and how nobody should use sexual assault as a weapon of war. And Anila, you spoke about the testimony of Muslims and about the sexual assault. And I don't know if you remember, there was someone at the end that was asking a question. It was anonymous, so technically we're not supposed to know who asked it, but we knew who was asking it. And it was about how do you explain why Israel is using the movie Scream Before Silence to justify the genocide in Gaza? And Anila was talking, and they didn't even believe her. Not me. I mean, of course, not going to believe me. I'm Jewish. But I think it's remarkable that when you have a narrative in mind, if you try to push against, and we know it from extremism, the more you push against the ideology, the more people are going to hold on to that ideology. And it was the perfect example for me. And that was, by the way, and I think it was the School of Gender or Feminism or something like that.
So why? It feels like my microphone is so loud. This has gone back decades. This was something that I've learned through this work. So UC Berkeley had a webinar that was required for its students in the Women's and Gender Study program who wanted an A. They had to attend this program. And because it was a webinar, we all signed up and watched it. The original title of the webinar was how Zionism is weaponizing feminism. There were some complaints about the name, so they changed the name to, support for Gaza and LGBTQI. It was some kind of, had nothing to do with what it was about. We reached out and said, can we have some of our experts participate? Can we talk? No, it was these 3 professors who basically said, everything has been debunked. Israel is lying. And that this has actually been going on since 1948 to cover up the fact that Israel has been raping Palestinian men, women, and children. They called screams.
With dogs or without?
Well, this was before the dogs. Before the dogs. They didn't know about the dogs. And that Sheryl Sandberg was part of the Hillary Clinton cabal. And here they are. These are professors. And they are saying it to the students. And the students believe them. So I said, I was talking to Professor Pam Nadell from American University. And I said, Pam, is this going on at AU? This is terrible. The next generation of women leaders and feminists are going to grow up thinking this. She said, Meredith, it's been happening since the 80s and in some cases the 60s. This has been taught on campuses for decades in the Gender and Women's Studies program with this anti-Israel ideology. This is one of the reasons the feminist organizations did not speak up, did not believe when Israel. The fact that we have to have these reports is horrifying, absolutely horrifying.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So this ties in directly to the campaign that you launched, and I don't think you have to, we all understand why it's important, but if you can talk a little bit more for those who are not as familiar with JWI's I Believe Israeli Women campaign, how did it come about, and what did it teach you about advocacy in general?
Absolutely. Well, JWI's mission is ending violence against women and girls. So when we started to learn about the sexual atrocities that occurred, we had to speak out. I am very grateful to the Seed the Dream Foundation, who reached out to partner, and we started with a delegation. Michelle Stravitz was one of our founding sisters, bringing 25 women who were experts in gender-based violence, in law, in media, to Israel specifically to meet with survivors, first responders, advocates. Our work is amplifying the voices of Israeli women. Again, to go back to who should be heard, this is not about hearing what I have to say. This is about amplifying the voices and making sure the truth is heard. And we have done everything from webinars, which I encourage all of you to sign up and see and learn, making sure that you are hearing from the experts, you know the work that's being done, you know the efforts. We did a study looking at how social media has been weaponized across various conflict zones. So this is part of our strategy, is to have what Ruth Halpern Kadari of the Dinah Project said, what we need is historic justice. One day when people say Darfur, Ukraine, they will also say Kfar Aza and Be'eri. When we sit at tables on conflict-related sexual violence, and it's seen that Israeli women are at that table, that is that proof. And through I Believe Israeli Women, we've done that. We've put together a global coalition of Ukrainian women, Colombian women, Yazidi women. We work with We Are Not Weapons of War, and we've brought Israeli advocates in this space. We've spoken to members of Congress just Thursday, I brought the CEO of the DINA project to meet with DOJ and FBI. This is the team that's investigating Hamas and looking to see if there are ways the U.S. can bring legal charges. And now that they know Sharon, they're going to use her as a witness. They've asked me to connect them with organizations that are bringing survivors to the United States. But it hasn't been easy. I wrote about this. There was a time we were at the UN at CSW, at the Commission on the Status of Women, and someone who represented the Nurses Association was doing an event and asked me to speak. It wasn't announced that I would speak, it wasn't there. She said, would you talk about the trauma, what you're experiencing as a Jewish woman? And I stood up and I started talking, and I wasn't judging. I was just like, let me share. Here, this is a conference about women's rights and women's issues. And as soon as the audience realized I was a Jewish woman, that I was talking about Israel, a group stood up and walked out. And it was so shocking to me. I feel so privileged. It was the first time that had happened. But again, that goes back to I was not worth listening to. They couldn't hear it. And at the same time, we were at CSW and we were sitting at a panel. And again, I was sitting with Ukrainian women, with Yazidi, and we talked about Israel. And Nava Ben-Or, who's a former judge in Israel, who's part of the DINA project, came over to me and she said, I feel like your heart heard my heart. And she's like, thank you. And she said, I never thought to hear we had over 100 people in the room, many of whom were not Jewish or Israeli. And they heard for the first time the truth of what happened. And so I take those moments that I so often feel like it's not enough, what am I doing? I'm just spinning my wheels, who am I helping? And it's those little, just someone saying, thank you. Like I feel heard and seen.
So just hearing you speak, Meredith, it seems to me that action and advocacy definitely has an impact on healing. And I wanted maybe Miri to kind of explain the psychology behind advocacy, work, action, because we see a lot more people doing that type of work, organization taking on these type of campaigns. How does that affect us from a psychological aspect on our healing? Or does it? I don't know.
Oh, it does, for sure. I mean, look at this panel. Doing agency is the best antidote for trauma. By doing, you're actually regulating yourself. So when you think about trauma, it's a loss of control, literally from the brain to the body, top down from the prefrontal cortex, to be specific. So if you're doing something, you're taking that control back. You mentioned that lack of control, right? And one of the things that we always teach people in the trauma world, and not just in the trauma world, in Israel, I gave this example earlier today. In Israel, even the youngest kid will have an assignment, something to do when they go to the safe room when there is the red color alert, right? It might be you bring a snack, or you close the window, or you bring a book. Because the act of doing is really regulating us back from the bottom up, from the body back to the brain. So again, there is reasoning for everything. There's this word in Hebrew, natan, and you spell it forward and backward the same way. Nun taf nun, or in English, N-A-T-T-A-N. Because when you give, you actually get something back. And I think for those of us who decided to take action, I would assume you're gaining something from it as well. There's this sense of meaning, like we talked about before, that when you have those days where you just can't take it anymore and you're burned out, and I would assume many of us have those moments of being completely burned out, those moments like Meredith was talking about, when someone come and say, thank you. I mean, I had one of those earlier today, where it just, when you lean into that, you put the flashlight, because we can choose. There is a choice that we can make. We can choose what to listen to, where to put our flashlight. And it can be on the haters and the moments of burnout, or we can actually choose to put it on those moments of someone saying thank you. You made a difference. You listen to someone's heartbeat. And if we can do that and mute that voice, that other voice, then we're actually on a better path for resiliency and for growth. think about like a circle of control, right? So there's a lot of things that we can actually control. We can control how we show up. We control when we show up. We can control what we eat in the morning, what we wear. There's a lot of things. It can be small nuances, but by saying it out loud, actually, but making a decision of what to control, we're actually more stronger. And because there's a lot of noise out there that is completely out of our control. We can choose not to listen to that. We can mute that.
And just to follow up on that, is there a risk of overdoing it, overacting?
Of course. We talked about burnout. Yes. It's really important to, and I'm not great in that, by the way. It's like, I always say I lead with compassion and vulnerability. This is the vulnerable part. We are all human beings, and sometimes we're going to need to take a break. And I think we're really good, many of us, of treating others with compassion, but not so great with self-compassion. It's actually really important to get some, we call it like money in our bank, or like to just energize ourselves a little bit, taking some moments for self-care, because we are on very limited resources, many of us, because of anti-Semitism and because the fight and the war and all those different thoughts that we have, and being a mother and worrying about our kids. There's so many different things, and it can be very overwhelming. So being able to listen to those kind of like voices of telling you, you need a break. You need a cup of coffee. You need to reconnect with a friend. You need something that will make you feel better at that moment in order to wake up the following day and keep fighting. There's nothing wrong with taking a day off. It's actually really important to do that. And if you're like me and you don't know how to stop, having a friend who tells you you should like take a moment right now, it's okay to do that. It's actually making you a better fighter, in my opinion.
I think we also have to acknowledge, in the beginning, I think about the survivors, and how many spoke in the beginning and how many really can't anymore. I think about Amit Susana, who was one of the first survivors to come forward. There were so many Nova survivors who I had the honor of interviewing on stage, and there's a limit. There's a limit. They feel like they have to do it because they survive, because that's the way they're honoring their friends, the way they're doing something. And they're struggling, and we need to know that. I interviewed Noah Beer, who is the young woman, if you've seen the video from Nova, she's blonde, she runs on stage, she was managing all the DJs, and she's the one who said, stop, run. And I said to her, how are you? And she's like, I'm broken. And when the Iranian war broke out, she was like, I'm done. And she moved to Cyprus. And I just think we have to know, I'm sure everyone in this room, if you're here, you are also probably somebody who went and heard a survivor, a former hostage speak. And I think the whole Israeli community, like I've spoken to many of my friends and colleagues there who are like, we're sick of being told we're resilient. Like we're exhausted.
Can I just comment on that? What you did was beautiful, though, because you asked her, how are you? When was the last time we asked people, how are you really doing, right? Not how are you doing right now, but like, no, take a breath. How are you? You gave her the space to not be okay. And I think especially for Israelis, giving that space is really important because, like you said, there is this metaphor of like we have to be resilient. We are resilient, and there is an end there, and life happens. And like you mentioned, Susan, like there is a lot that happens outside of being just an Israeli, and it's this compound trauma. So I guess my call for action for you, based on what you're saying, ask people, how are you? And pause.
Even asking myself, how am I doing today? And having the pause of giving myself also some grace.
100%. So Son, you bring a unique background and experience to this discussion, and we know that the Druze community has gone through tremendous loss and trauma as well over the last couple years. So your experience as a Druze, Israeli, mother, public servant, it gets complicated. What have you learned from your experience, in particular focusing maybe on the Druze aspect on how to deal with trauma. How is there anything from those experiences that you can bring?
So I'll start from the end, and then there's something really that I would like to share with all of you. As a special experience I went through here, both as a human being, mother, and a diplomat. The Druze way of dealing with trauma is not different than any others. It's community support. And since we believe in reincarnation, so the death has different meaning as well. And there's a process of grieving and getting a lot of support of friends and family members, even when you're not religious and you don't go to the religious places to pray at. But what happened here was really shocking to me at the beginning. You know, I had the chance, I was lucky enough for 42 years. I was born when the Sadat Agreement and Begin was signed, the most important peace treaty in our region, and still the most important one. And my late grandfather was a poet. He was an artist. If you have been to En Gedi, the kibbutz near, so all the beautiful stonework that is done there, it was his work. And I spent there a lot of summers as a child. And he was a poet. And every time there was an occasion, he was writing a poem. And somehow he noticed that I have a capability to stand in front of people and read poems, learning them by heart since age of 5. So when I was born, he wrote a beautiful poem to my parents. And since age of 5, I was performing on stages, reading poems that he wrote till he passed away. And I felt that I was coming with a mission of, I'm kind of a bridge. In one hand, a very involved family, very senior officers in the Israeli army, in the IDF. On the other hand, a family of authors, where some of them were supporting the Palestinians. So I was in a place where I could see both sides and manage it. And this is what led me to become a diplomat. And I was lucky enough to serve in times in several places, in several of my missions, where there was really peacemaking process. That was phenomenal. So the first one was supposed to be Cairo. I was supposed to be the spokesperson of our embassy. And I traveled to Cairo back in January 2011. Reaching Cairo, you know, we consumed the culture, the music, everything, the movies in Israel. This is like the most engaging activity for Israelis my age on Friday evening. All the family sits and watches the Egyptian movie. And I arrived there. I need to go to the embassy, and then I see that I cannot go freely to the embassy. You know, I was in New York before in a working visit. I know how you get to your consulates and embassies. The security told me you can't do it. You need to be in an escorted convoy of cars with police and security. I never thought that I will have that in DC 15 years later. We had 24/7 demonstrations in front of the embassy, cursing us, attacking us, throwing red paint on us, calling us Nazis, baby killers, you name it. Everything that you hear was on our face like this. Every day. Every day. So the things that we have been here as an embassy was shocking for me as a diplomat. But something started earlier. When we arrived in August 2022, my son went to Jackson Reed High School. It's close to the embassy, very easy to get to. He wanted the experience of having a public American school. He came back the first day. And this is something I want to tell you. Trust your children. They came the first day and he said, "Mom, you cannot believe what's going on." I was hardly a few weeks in my position, and one of my main tasks and responsibilities is to combat anti-Semitism. I really couldn't believe it. The first day of school at the atrium, huge place, there was a campaign of a student who came from Lebanon, took the whole Israeli map, colored it red, called it Palestine, and he was collecting donations to Gaza people, to Gaza children. And I said, like, sorry, WTF? What is this? What's going on? So I figured out that there was another mom at school with twins, 2 daughters, and we were both pissed off. So we called the principal and we asked for a meeting. And when we both went to the meeting, the principal looked at me and he said, "Can you explain who you are? You know, your son speaks Arabic and you're not Jewish, but you're saying you're Israelis, so what, are you Israeli Palestinian?" The amount of ignorance and the lack of information and the lack of interest to know as well, of curiosity, shocked me. And then we started a whole campaign the whole year, me and that mother, trying to combat these kind of projects at the school, which were very, very clearly and openly known, supported by agents. I call them by teachers, by counselors, by students who were coming to the campus and pushing these elements against Israel every day, everywhere. You would see all signs around the school, and there was no October 7 by then. In fact, it was one of the most quiet periods between Israel and what was happening in Gaza Strip. We were looking at Jenin, we were looking at the West Bank, we were looking at the strengthening units and cells of Hamas on the other side of the country, not on that side. And when October 7 happened, it just exploded. I was interviewed shortly after, and I was asked about it, and I said, "I'm not surprised. I've seen it all, it was there." And what you mentioned before, of decades ago, it was all there. And for the whole year, between 2022 till 2023, I went back to my embassy and I told my supervisors, we are losing it. Putting efforts, money, human resources, working in campuses of universities, it's a lost deal. We lost it. These children from K to 12, because I started also seeing that on my other son's school, which was a private one, a middle school, is tremendously high. You don't know what they are consuming. For example, just before the war started, the history teacher gives my son a task to do an essay about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Do you know which resources she gave him? Can you imagine? Al Jazeera and B'Tselem. And when I called her and I told her, you know, you don't need to go to foreign resources. You can use your own administrations. They have been both, very keen about the state of Israel. You don't need to go out. And you know what I told her? God forbids if you can claim that the UN is a Zionist organization. Can anyone say that? Go to its own resolutions. It didn't work. And then my son started, when the war began, started getting more and more Jewish friends who were afraid to speak before, getting together. And the greatest help when he spoke about community is that I knew that I can reach out to JCRC. I knew I could reach to the counselor at his school, who was Jewish, and she was our angel through all his high school studies. I knew I can reach to ADL. I knew it. I hope every parent will know that too, because that helps a lot. You're not alone. And then other kids and other families started gathering together, and the kids came up with the idea that they want to have an Israeli club, students' club. And again, the teacher, who was Jewish, was responsible for clubs, rejected the request. So I called her and I said, can you explain why did you reject it? Like the Palestinians are having festivals at the school with symbols against Israel and clearly like open messages. And she said, he can join the Jewish club. And I said, thank you so much, but he's not Jewish. She said that doesn't matter. So, as we spoke at the beginning, nothing matters. And they did not give up. They got all the support they could. Sarah was with us closely, working. Really, there were phone calls. She was talking to my son more than what she was talking to me. And they got together, they were empowered, and eventually they managed to open the Israeli Student Club for the first time at Jackson Reed. So, you know, I started with the end, but like I'm now going to the beginning of what my answer is. It ends and starts with community. Community and support, and knowing that you're not alone in this, and there are many people who are sharing you with that, and you don't need to be afraid and worried. Yes, I'm worried. Yes, I'm afraid that we will be attacked. We had that. Our Sarah was killed in a Jewish event, simply because she's Jewish and they're Israelis. This is not you know, the fear is there, but there is a way that if I let the fear control me, or I control it, and I do, in order to make a better space for all of us. And this is my message, is that you can do it. And don't keep silent. And Sarah was the voice of a lot of Israeli women. And her murderer will not silence her voice. We will continue her. So this is why wherever we are, we just marked an anniversary this week. We continue her legacy on that because it's a bigger mission for all of us. And I wish you all join me on it too. Sorry, it was too long.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. I mean, it's so important, and just kind of thinking through the trauma that you have had to go through as a diplomat, an Israeli diplomat, and having to go through the embassy. I mean, I attended one embassy event a couple of years ago, and I was just from going to the event, I felt like palpitation, because like all these people were out there and red hands, you know, which symbolizes all this kind of things, and yelling and shouting, just having to deal with that on a day-to-day basis. It just
And there is something, you know, I'm here in my capacity as well as a member of the embassy's team. We had a serious work at the embassy, collecting facts. And we know that, you know, when you have such kind of a hate narrative, facts don't matter. But we want to make it matter. So we created a booklet with the ambassador that explains actually what happened in Gaza when you are being faced with questions of, is it a genocide, or is it a famine, or Israel was starving the children? You will see numbers based also on international community reports that would help you dealing with these simply inaccurate, or I would say lies about the status of Israel. Now, Israel is not a perfect state. You know it exactly like me, you're a minority too here, right? We are the same. But I know that this is a democratic state and state ruled by law, where I can get my rights and I fight for them if they're not given to me as others are. So I really encourage you, if there's something that you're struggling with, or for your children at schools, there is a lot of information out there that can help with the facts. Again, it's not about facts, the narrative outside. The narrative is more about non-Israel.
You know, it's hard to have the conversations, and even when you're armed with the facts, it's so easy for people to say, this is a lie, this is Israeli propaganda, that is AI, this is whatever. And I remember being in Israel, we were there, Alana Newhouse, who was the founder and publisher of Tablet Magazine, and I said, Alana, what are we going to do? How are we going to change minds? She's like, think of people on a scale of 1 to 4. The 1 are from the river to the sea, and the 4 are the most pro-Israel. She said, don't waste your time on the 1s and 2s. Just don't. She said, instead, make sure the 4s are armed with the information they need, and make sure the 3s are emboldened to use their voices. Yeah, and when we talk about where we find hope, I think the story of your son and the bravery of your son and his friends and those young people, that is not easy.
No.
The strength and the bravery it took for them to create an Israel club, to go to an Israel club, is remarkable and says so much about who you are as a mother and who he is as a young man. And that's that fills my well. That's where I find hope and strength.
What the young generation can do, even when we think that it's too difficult for us, even as adults.
Well, I think there's something to say how we all have emotions, and fear is something that is shared for all of us, but so does hope.
Yeah.
Right? And we're stronger when we're together. I mean, I'm hearing their son's story. It's like, we just pulled my son out of public school system because of anti-Semitism, right? And I bet there are other parents in this room that are facing this dilemma. And we didn't pull him out because I'm done fighting. I was telling my friend, they clearly didn't Google my name. We're still fighting them because I know I have a community behind me, and I'm not doing it for my son.
Yeah.
I'm doing it because of every other Jewish kid. And when you said that higher education, it's too late, I completely agree with you. I would argue that, yes, facts are important, but we are awake now, not woke.
Exactly.
We're awake.
Exactly.
And I encourage every parent in this room, ask questions, be curious, because education is where it starts. It's not where it ends. And when they get to college, it's almost like it's too late, but we have a lot of work to do in K-12.
And speaking of education, I will never forget meeting Representative Jen Schakowsky. And she was talking about how important it is to run for office at every step. And she said, you know, when you think about the school board or the library board, they control education. I have never before in my life paid so much attention to the upcoming local elections. And I've been getting, I know JCRC does work on this. Pay attention and vote.
Yeah, no,
Just to add on that, you know, what's happening at schools as well as campuses and in the public spectrum is not coincidence. It's not like this hate just came up like that. There's a lot of money being invested in it. And I encourage you to read the last FDD report from last week, the Foundation of Defense and Democracy, about the billions that, in this case, Qatar put also in schools in K-12. So it's, I feel that it's our responsibility as parents and as adults to make sure that our children are having the objective education they need to have of critical thinking, not of observing very one-sided part of the story.
yeah, no, I agree with all of that. And I guess you put a plug in for the JCRC. I think if you're here, you all know that we do really important work as it relates to school and education. If anyone has an issue, you should be reaching out to us, to Gila, to Sarah. We have a staff that's unfortunately knows a lot about it and knows how to handle and has great relationships, which is so important with all the various school systems. I will say that as far as the Board of Education race, very important to pay attention to that. I know we hosted here at Bethel a session last year with the candidates. JCRC was organizing that along with Bethel, and there are others as well. There's a guide out, so definitely pay attention to that. I think it has been deserving and getting more attention this time around because of these issues. So those are all important issues that everyone has brought up. But one of the things that we wanted to talk about, the topic of tonight, is healing and healing together as a community. So what is one piece of advice that you can give people here? What is one thing they can do to sort of strengthen their own resilience and growth, either as a community or maybe individually? We'll start with you, Miri.
Oh, it's me first. Well, there's so many. First of all, events like that. There is a lot of events that we all go to that are actually going to lead to more anxiety, at least for me. I mean, I'm going to one tomorrow, and I was like, I'm already preparing myself. But events like that that brings the community together are really rewarding and energizing, and it reminds us that we're not alone again. Connections with people. I can't even tell you how many people I've met since October 7th that became colleagues and friends and people that I look up to and people that I can call and say, I'm having a really hard time today. And I would never met them otherwise. It's just the people you collect along the way that you just hold them close to your heart for those moments. Taking care of yourself, as we talked about before, because this is going to be a very long marathon, and we do not have a lot of people cheering for us. So you want to save your power. You want to take moments of self-care. You want to make sure that you're practicing self-regulation and distress tolerance and all those skills, and how to keep healing and not lose hope. I mean, that's the million-dollar question, and at the same time, I feel like we are born to do this, right? We have seen this before. We have been in this fight before, and our body is wired to keep fighting this fight because of who we are as a people, but also as human beings. And I will say that when we treat others with the same type of respect that we want to get, when we lean in with this compassion and with this vulnerability, my hope is that others will start seeing us as human beings as well, that they will stop dehumanizing us. When we reach out for the other person, you never know who's on the other side. And, you know, my other hat is I'm working with extremism. And we had this conversation before about, can people really change? Well, I work with a former neo-Nazi and a former Islamist. So yes, people can change when you give them the opportunity and if they want to change. So find those people. Those are, I guess, when you think of that scale, those are my people.
Thank you. Meredith, same question to you.
I mentioned earlier about this survey that we did of young Jewish women across the U.S. And what we found is that 90% have experienced some form of anti-Semitism, 75% have lost friends, 50% are dating less. They are scrubbing their resumes of Jewish experiences. As one young woman this morning said, she doesn't want a future employer to think she might be problematic. They are traumatized or re-traumatized if they are survivors. And when we ask them what they need in this moment, what they want is to connect with Jewish women who are older than they are, who can be role models and mentors. They're looking for that network. They're looking, as you said, the post-traumatic growth. They want to be leaders. They want to rise from this moment, and they want to help others. And they're looking to us to be there for them and to help them. So I would say, reach out to someone younger and be there and let them know you're there and you've got them. And they don't have to have coffee with you to talk about being Jewish or about Israel, but they can just talk about their career development or about life, and you can share with them what's going on in yours. But be a mentor and a role model in this moment.
Thank you. So important. Just as a follow-up, is there anything more formal for that, or is it? Are you thinking of?
We are, yeah. And in fact, I left information on the hallway. We're now building out multiple different resources responding to the needs identified in the survey. One thing is a 3-part series of workshops on being Jewish in the workplace. We're piloting it in New York, but we'll be bringing it to DC. So please connect with me if you'd like to get involved. We're partnering with Gesher Community Cares, who's here to help get the young women connected to therapists who are safe and supportive and won't tell them that maybe they'd feel better if they were more sympathetic to the Palestinian women. So if you are a therapist, definitely talk to Shelley, who's in the room, to connect with that. And we're going to be launching a mentoring platform. And it's through UpNotch, where you can just easily load up your profile, who you are, times you're available, and young women will be able to connect with you. So please sign up to get on our email list, and you'll get all of this information.
Perfect. Thank you. So, San, same question to you.
Wow. Like everything you both have said is so powerful and right, and I'm just going through my experience in my mind while you were speaking, and I was like, yes, this, and yes, that too. So there's a beautiful saying in my community that if you don't have an adult, make yourself an adult. create an adult for you to mentor you. So I really also love this. I lost hope. There was a time before May 21st last year that I totally lost hope. It can get worse. Like, the only thing that didn't happen was Star Wars. Every day we had another thing and another thing to deal with. And you see that, like, this circle of darkness just closing in you and you can't breathe. So the only way that helped me to do it was following your recommendation, was doing. When I lost hope, I said I artificially want to put it in my life again. So I wrote on my board at the office, it's going to be okay, Yeh Tov, in Hebrew. And then I found a beautiful quote from, famous, I can't remember the name, American author called Hope. So I bought it and I put it in front of me at home. Like, wherever I go, I see the word hope. So it's there, it's gonna come back, just trust it. And I kept doing. This helped me a lot. And doing in a way that where I find these dark spots, I wanna see how I can help clear it and put the light in. So if it's the matter of the health system, where we are seeing a very worrying rise of anti-Semitism, and I have the capability as an embassy, we send a delegation of health, opinion makers in health system to Israel. Go and see what's happening in Israel. And then let's talk. We have here participants who were very fundamental in this beautiful project, and we're continuing with it. And now we're working on having the possibility as well for educators and for superintendents. Just come to Israel, and you're gonna teach about it, see it first, and then come back and discuss it. So it was just by doing. This was the only thing that helped. And, you have no other choice, like in Israel.
But you were doing based on your values, and I think that's really important, because we can do a lot of things, but you did it mindfully based on something you believed in. And when we do that, when we have our values to guide us, that's when you really make the transformation.
Thank you for those comments. We do have, JCRC did put together a list of resources for folks if you want to take a look. I think it's outside, right? There's a barcode as well, so you can connect and see how can you get active, how can you take action. If you have an issue, who you can reach out to. We wanted now at this juncture to open the session to some Q&A if people have any questions. Before we get an opportunity to just mingle a little bit over, I think, some cookies or coffee or decaf outside. So opening it, and I think, Adam, you will have the mic. Yeah.
Great, and let's try to keep the questions brief. We'll take a few together.
So tomorrow night I am signed up to hear Rachel Goldberg-Polin, who is speaking at Washington Hebrew. She has been speaking around the country. She wrote a book, When We See You Again. I'm reading it. It's hard to read. It's very poignant. It's a mother's story of a terrible, horrific loss. And I'm just curious to know whether what she is doing in the act of doing, speaking out, if this is enough, if it's the right thing to do. I have to say that somebody mentioned to me that this woman, Rachel, has taken the attention away from the other hostages in terms of their families, their victims and all. And this is a Jewish woman, but I'm pondering that, and I'm wondering, can Rachel speak for all? Is it her right to speak for all? You mentioned that, Meredith, that some of the victims' parents or relatives are tired of speaking out. So I just want to know, what is your response to this? Because she's doing, to me, an incredibly important job by speaking out on TV, on 60 Minutes, through her book, and in all of these other venues that she's attending around the country.
Thank you. Okay, we'll take one more.
Hi. First, I just want to give some background. I'm an anthropologist and had to deal with an organization that voted for a version of BDS. And your article was like a real eye-opener to me. But in the kind of community work I'm doing and dealing with family, I find if you jump to educating people, it just invites an argument or shutting down. And the training I've been doing recently is more about getting people to tell you a story and sort of disarm them. I want to know what your experience is with that, because it can get a little frustrating. It's kind of like, well, you know, when do I get to say my piece? But I just want to know, is there data on this? How do you see this? Because it does seem, at least from my trainer, that you can start to pull along some twos and put them into threes, or at least, you know, open their minds.
Okay, so maybe we'll start with the first question about Rachel Goldo-Poland, who's been, I mean, it's just she's gone through so much and she's been sharing with everyone. I think the question was, is she doing too much, or is it in any way distracting, or does she even have a choice here in terms of how she is dealing with it? If anyone has a comment.
I think she's remarkable. I don't know, as a mother, I can't imagine what it was like. And she somehow became, in many ways, the face. I know the Hostage Family Forum did tremendous work, but maybe because she's American also, that she spoke to so many Americans, and she's telling her story. She's telling her son's story. She doesn't need to speak. She's not pulling attention away from anyone. If anything, maybe someone hears that and wants to learn more and hears the universal pain that she's sharing. And through that story, they'll learn more, and they'll learn about the others. It's not her responsibility to speak for all the families, and she's not taking away, and they have all, in their own ways, found their own way to heal. You know, we learn about that when we talk about survivors of sexual violence. Not every survivor can come forward. They've got to take that path. And thank God she has a book and has a platform, and people are hearing. And I wish her peace and healing, just like finally meeting Sarah's parents. And you know, at the heart of it, they're parents, and these are their children. And this was, October 7th was about young people. Like, for those who've walked through the kibbutzim, it's the sections where the young people lived were devastated. Nova is where young people. It's devastating. It was young people who were serving and fighting. My heart is with her.
I think what I found quite just amazing about Rachel's and how she has the ability to really put in words, and that's her talent, what I think everyone is feeling. And I think that's what has drawn so many people to that story, is just her way of really describing how we all feel. And in a way, it's sort of, even though it's not our son, we feel like he is our son, or like all the other hostages were in fact part of our family. And I think that's really crystallized that. And in fact, she actually has the book is out on Audible, so she reads it, which I listened to, and it's heart-wrenching actually hearing her read the book. But that the storytelling and her ability to tell her own story sort of ties into the second question of what's the best way if you have strategies, I guess, to advocate. Is it better to educate? I know we're all trying to do it. Sometimes educating, I think Sarah of JCRC made the comment that a lot of times when we teach about the Holocaust, that's when we see more incidents of anti-Semitism. And so is education the answer? Is it storytelling? Is it a combination? I don't know if you have any comments on that.
It depends on the audience. I would say that in general, if someone doesn't want to listen to you, they're not going to listen no matter which strategy you're going to take. From the data with working with more extremism, and I'm not saying that every person that doesn't like you is an extremist, if you push against ideology and give data, it's actually not going to work. If you shame them, that is not going to work. If you try to understand the function of the behavior and what's behind it, that would actually open the door. So my approach, and it doesn't always work, is to lean it with humanity and try to have them see me as a human being, as a whole, and not as a problem. I try to find a shared narrative. It might, and that will be the storytelling aspect. I will usually start with that. I would try to go back to fear. When was the last time they felt fear? Or when was the last time they felt attacked or misunderstood? And I have them sit with it. Think of a person in the room. Think of a person not in the room. Think of a person in your life. And just imagine that person feeling really misunderstood and asking for help. And I have them sit with that for a while, and then I'll do that way before I start to give them education. Because if you don't open the door, they're not going to hear your words anyway. So I lead with that. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. I was talking about it the other day with someone. I'm doing it as training for medical students tomorrow at Sinai Hospital. And I'm starting with a story, and then my plan, and I'll let you know if it's working or not. It's the first time I'm trying it, is not to reveal that it's a Jewish doctor or a Jewish patient. It's to just talk about a human being and what they experience. And once you got them hooked, then to reveal it. I don't know if it's going to work. We'll find out.
Okay, very good. I think, Adam, we have
We
time.
can take maybe one or two more, and then I think we'll wrap it up if anyone has a question. Okay, I think we can just wrap it up.
Okay.
Oh, wait. Great.
So we mentioned elections are coming up, and obviously the local candidates are really, really important in this this journey we're taking together. And the problem is getting to know who is on the Board of Education and what their feelings are, and how, where do we come from in terms of evaluating how we're going to vote. And I was wondering if there was material on Montgomery County Board of Education candidates and where that could be found.
Yeah, so we do have a guide we put out. JCRC put out a guide, and I know we may have online, but there are a lot. It's all online, and there are meetings. There have been meetings and just forums where the Board of Education candidates and others have been speaking. So I definitely encourage you to attend those. But the guide that the JCRC specifically put on issues that are of interest to our community is online. So you can definitely check it out there.
And if you still have questions, please reach out to the JCRC. There will be plenty of people, whether it's Gila, Sarah, who will be able to answer questions about specific candidates and the elections. Any other last questions? Okay. Yeah, one more. Okay, we'll take one more and then we'll close it.
Not sure if it's a question. But I think of the Democrats against the Republicans and how people would talk about the Democrats being a certain way. We're about wanting the environment to be better and da la la la. Then I start thinking, if we know what issues are, and we know that education may not be the answer in trying to educate somebody, are we looking at new ways of dealing with things? If we know the other side is using AI and coming out with propaganda and all these things, we always want to be on the higher road, right? But why aren't we using more strategies that can somehow deflect what they're doing? And I feel like we've always been doing things the same way. What are the new strategies that we can try? And keeping up with what's happening in technology.
So I just wanted to add one thing, and then, Mary, I remember in the beginning, I would say to my colleagues in Israel, I've seen the pictures. I've seen the step. Why aren't you putting that online? Why aren't you come back? We are seeing, here in the US, all we're seeing are these horrible pictures out of Gaza. Show the pictures. And they won't. On the one hand, they say it doesn't matter. If we put it up, they're going to say it's fake. And on the other, they respect the victims and survivors, and they won't show it. So that's, I think we're also dealing with a different, like, the way people are being used. So that's, I know that's not quite what you were asking, but that was one challenge when it came to, like, the social media stuff. But
No, so I just want to clarify, and I don't know if you have more to add on that. Actually, I'm interested, but education is everything. I don't want it to, and we talked about like how important it is, but people need to be open to listen to the education as well. That was my point. And there are other methods people are using. I mean, I was telling my friend Laura, my feed is either all anti-Semitism or puppies. There's no in between. So my algorithm is very specific, and I know that there are actually a lot of startup companies that are looking at AI and looking at different ways to combat that. That's my coping, I'm sorry. It is, we might get another dog, I don't know. But there is something to say about, Democrat, liberal. The data from Parents for Peace organization I work for, we have a helpline. And people can call and say, I'm worried about my loved one being radicalized, and we provide support. Over 70% of our phone call, and we work with every single ideology, far left, far right, Islamist, eco-terrorism, you name it. 70% of our calls have anti-Semitic content, even if the target is not Jewish, by the way. It is the connective tissue across every ideology. So from extremism perspective, we're absolutely working on the debunking and educating. And my approach is to make people care. And when they shut the door because I'm Jewish and talking about anti-Semitism, then I talk about extremism. Because hopefully people care about what's happening in their country, regardless if they're whatever, Democrat, liberal, whatever, wherever they come from. So there is a lot of different methods, and I think the embassy has been working on some stuff, ADL has been working, JCRC have been working on it, but you need to find the resources.
I totally agree.
Disagree with me.
No, you're just saying correct things, the right things I believe in. Thank you. Well, it's Sunday evening. It's like you get me without filters. I would say the following. I'll speak as a person, we use this word hasbara, okay? And I'm a public diplomacy, the Minister for Public Diplomacy, big names, believe me, doesn't have a driver nor any benefits, other benefits than hard work. The only thing that I can explain about why we are in such a huge gap with the other campaign, with the anti-Israel and anti-Semitic campaign, is first of all, we don't have the money that has been invested for years by the other side. We don't have the capabilities that have been invested for so long. And it's not, when I came and I realized back in 2022 that the problem is K-12 much earlier than campuses, I spoke to some of the Jewish organizations. We were in a direct talks about it, and I'm so happy to see more and more K-12. It was a huge weight on your shoulders, Gila and Sarah and the JCRC. And why I'm saying that? One of the things is, and this especially became very clear to me after October 7, when you have a limited amount of assets, I prefer to be alive, and then I will deal with being bullied. In our case in Israel, the investment of the international assets, of the national assets, are gone to protect ourselves, to be alive. Simply, as simple as that. So we didn't have budget for many, many years to work on PR and campaigns and strategies and so on and so on. just recently, last year and this year even better, we got a very serious budget, and it's dedicated to bring delegations to Israel. And then, you know, for people who are in junctions of decision makers and people who are influential, this is the way that we are trying to bring it up. We cannot lie. I can't lie as an embassy. I need to be reliable, and I must have my credibility. So when someone puts a faked fact or like a fake picture or information, I am a state ruled by law. I need to go through my bureaucracy, okay? And to get the confirmation to answer yes or no. And that takes time. We lost it. We lost that war as well on that front. So, you know, if we were speaking about 7 fronts before, and the 8th front is the anti-Semitism, in my opinion, this is the most critical and dangerous front right now, is what's happening to the Jewish and the Israeli communities around the world. And, you know, you have no other way but to keep telling the truth, even when they don't want to hear it. And whenever we can empower this, sorry, I remembered now. The Jewish philanthropy is going mainly to buildings. The Qatari money is going to people in middle rank, okay, in places where you see very influential, for example, pro-Hamas educators or officers or whatever, in any other organization, and they are the ones who put the curriculum, or they are the ones who deal with, you know, with your daily life, and this is more influential. Or they bring the professors, they take them to Qatar to study, they take them, like where most of the foreigners learn Arabic when they want to become diplomats. They go to Arab countries. That's a done deal. You will never be pro-Israel if you go to another country, no matter how close the administrations are. So small changes can happen, but it's a long run.
I think we have to start playing the long game also, to your point. It's really interesting. When I was growing up and I went to Hebrew school, we learned Israel was about the oranges and the miracle of the blooming the desert, and it was all positive, and we were proud. And I remember watching the mini-series about the Holocaust on TV when I was very little, and one of my friends, her mother's was a survivor. Like, our children's generation were raised a little differently, and it was very interesting. One of the young women, again, this morning, said she grew up going to URJ camps, Eisner. Half of her friends are now anti-Israel and have said they will not send their children to a Jewish camp. And I think this conflation of tzedakah, and not tzedakah, but tikkun olam, and almost being embarrassed that we have, as Jewish, we're privileged, we're well, and that we need to care about, and yes, care about others, we should care about everybody, but there was like almost a shame in who we are. And I think we need to start changing our Jewish education systems and how we're talking to our children. And I don't know how, that's for the rabbis and the educators to figure out, but like, I think we've lost something in this generation, and it scares me, and I hope there's some way to bring it back in the next generation.
Not as bad as you think.
Oh, good.
I'm feeling pretty good about my kids, I can say. So
And you're right. You know, when I look at my kids, at the young women who I spent the weekend with, at those who are connecting with JWI, I know after October 7th, our Young Women's Networks grew. After we launched I Believe Israeli Women, they were looking for a safe place. And I agree with you. And, you know, I think, like you said, Sunday nights, I'm kind of feeling hopeless right now. And yeah, there are a lot of seeing the kids who got stronger in these moments. You're absolutely right. We can't forget about that.
Can I put one more plug? Because I have another thought. Interfaith. Right, Anila and I were talking about it. There is something about reaching out to other communities that are willing to do things together and bringing that actual piece, right? Bringing it all together. I mean, Anila, as an educator, you were talking about it years ago as well, where there's something to say about we're not alone and we have allies, and some of them are willing to do that work with us. And it's not, you mentioned the pain, and it's not an Olympic of pain. It's not a hierarchy of who's suffering more. We can see each other as human beings, and if we can collaborate with other people around that, I think hopefully people will be more willing to listen.
Thank you for that comment, Miri. That's obviously so important to know. Of course, we focus on our community, but reaching out to other communities we can collaborate with, which is something we do at the JCRC, is very important as well, because we do believe that working together makes everyone stronger. So with those important comments, I'd like to end the panel for now. Thank you for bringing all your personal stories, so thoughtful, at times depressing, but very insightful, vulnerable, and uplifting as well. So hopefully everyone who came tonight, Sunday night, leaves with something that they can maybe act on or do differently, or just took some hope from the discussion today. So I wanted to just thank our amazing panel for tonight.